Hey all. So this is just going to be an update to that prior video clip on my thoughts on the American presidency. Always a tricky thing, right? We've had, 45, 46 presidents over our history. So you don't want to start talking too much about any one president, right? Because it is an institution, the presidency. But it's also true, right, that more than any other major American political institution, that institution is defined disproportionately by a single occupant, one at a time. And it's hard, right, not to be drawn a little bit towards talking disproportionately about the current occupant of the White House, whoever that happens to be. Dating myself here, but when I first started teaching American politics, including the presidency, who would have been president? As early as, would have been probably George H.W. Bush. Bush the Elder. So I think I started out with that sort of a focus, right? Let's talk about the presidency of George H.W. Bush the Elder, right up to today, the presidency of Donald Trump. And some of those things you realize, right? We talked about it as if it was a big deal, and at the time it seemed like a big deal, right? But oftentimes the sands of time show you that that was just a blip, and it wasn't really all that important in the grand scheme of things. So that's why you want to be a little bit careful about emphasizing too much what's happening in the moment with the current president, because often time will wash that away as no big deal, really. Pro or con, positive or negative. But that being said, the current contretemps here regarding presidential power centers around President Trump's claim the other day that he is the one who decides when to reopen the country after the peak of the coronavirus pandemic, not the states. And the governors can be overridden by him. He has total authority. As a political scientist or as an American citizen, that language grates, right? Because we tried to create a government of limited authority. Although, right, we also know that there's that John Locke argument about executive prerogative, that during extraordinary times like the Civil War, a president should be able to seize extra power, even if it violates the Constitution to some degree, because it's better to save the Republic than to have total fidelity to the Constitution, right? That's the Lockean argument going back to the 1690s. So that deserves real weight, right? John Locke was a pretty brilliant guy. But he also said, right, once that crisis passes, you should go back to the normal order of things where you have the legislature as primary, the executive branch as secondary. That's always the question. Can you go back to that normal state of affairs after executive prerogative during a crisis? That's something to think about. Whether that president is Abraham Lincoln, Franklin Delano Roosevelt in the Great Depression, George W. Bush and the invasions of Iraq and Afghanistan, or whether it's Donald Trump and the coronavirus pandemic. Always good questions to ask, with no easy answers. So, Trump's claim, right? It's not clear where that's coming from. He's, as always, vague as hell. Seems to have no particular knowledge of the Constitution or the 10th Amendment or the shape of American federalism. But that's par for the course for President Trump, right? Not a scholar of American history, not a close and keen observer of our political institutions. Seems to have little knowledge of the U.S. Constitution or history. And again, these are all things that make him appealing to tens of millions of Americans, right? Because they say, well, then he can get outside of the box here and do what's needed to be done, case by case. Okay. So, does he have that authority? Near as we can tell, he does not have that authority. Trump is a notorious chest beater, making outlandish claims. That's his entire career, from soup to nuts, from start to finish, from his beginnings as the son of a real estate scion in New York City, right up to his presidency. Lots of outrageous claims that don't have actual support in evidence or data. That seems to be the case here, so very typical. Right? This is what we've come to accept as the Trump presidency. Yeah, right, because we know that governors and the states, right? What does the 10th Amendment say? Powers not delegated to the national government nor denied to the states are reserved to the states or to the people. So it seems like a lot of these decisions about stay-at-home orders seem to be powers that are reserved to the states under the terms of the 10th Amendment. Trump, we know, right, adamantly refused to issue a national stay-at-home order. Maybe that was the right thing to do. Maybe it wasn't. Maybe it would have been constitutional. Maybe it wouldn't have. That's all water under the bridge, right? We know that he didn't. He said, leave it up to the states. And there's arguments for and against that. But that's what happened, right? We ended up with a patchwork response. And now he's saying, but forget that. Now I'm going to step in and say when to reopen. Someone said it's like he wants to, right, not take responsibility for the downside, stay-at-home orders, right, that people sort of chafe against and hurts our economy. He doesn't want to take responsibility for any of the negatives, so leave it up to the governors for that. They can do my shit work for me. But then when it comes to reopening, right, something that people are going to like, and then getting back to normal and reviving the economy, he says that he can do that because then he can take credit for that. So he avoids the blame, right, takes the credit. Again, that's his entire career. This fits right in as a pattern, a deeper pattern. Yeah, so I think that's kind of where he's coming from, right? He don't want to take responsibility for the negative economic impact of the stay-at-home orders, but he wants to take credit for lifting them and getting the economy going again in the run-up to that November election. Yeah, now does he have the authority to do that, to override the governors? We do have the supremacy clause, but remember, the supremacy clause only applies when the federal government is exercising its properly enumerated power. So is this an enumerated power of the presidency under Article 2 language? It's hard to see where that language is in Article 2 that he would be acting on to lift those state orders. So we're going to assume here, pending sort of further developments or deeper research into the Constitution, that President Trump probably does not have the authority to unilaterally lift state-level stay-at-home orders. That's going to be up to the governors, it looks like. And we've seen already, right, some movement by geographic concentrations of states to coordinate when to reopen, how to reopen, what the rollout looks like. I think some Pacific states, Pacific Ocean sort of bordering states, maybe Washington, Oregon, California, have said that they're going to come to some sort of a coherent vision for how that's going to happen. I think maybe some other states and other parts of the country are doing the same, trying to do it not state by state, but region by region, which may be appropriate. And the argument is, right, that, and keep this in mind, I'm going a little afield here, sorry, that the only way to really get the economy back going again at full strength is going to be when we have a vaccine. Right? Because you can even say, you can lift a stay-at-home order, but how many of us are going to be anxious to suddenly dash back out into large crowds on the regular until we have a vaccine? So even when things are starting to reopen, probably on a rolling stepped basis, it's not going to mean the economy is going to roar back to life. I know Trump has that vision, right? Because he's deeply concerned about his re-election efforts, which right now don't look super fantastic. By no means do you rule the guy out, but right now, where we're at right now, that could change by November, so I always want to hedge my damn bets there. But right now, yeah, his chances look a little sketchy. You would say he's in it, but he's on the margins of being in it. And so he's pinning a lot, right, on the economy being restarted before November arrives. But the problem with that is, there's been some notion that there might be a group of research scientists in Britain who are working on a vaccine. They think it could be ready to roll out as early as September or October. But remember, that's only rolling it out maybe, best case scenario, maybe. That's really early. It'll be amazing, but it seems like it's maybe possible. Look, it's one thing to roll it out. It's another to scale it up to vaccinate, 7 billion people globally. How long will that take? That's going to take a couple of years to scale it up. You don't produce 7 billion doses quickly. And if it's a British group that produces that first viable vaccine, right, the people of Great Britain will get access to it first. That's just the way it works. Partly because of the world that Trump wants, right? It was every nation for itself. So that can work to our benefit in some cases and to our disbenefit in others. That's the problem with that approach. Don't get me started. But yeah, it's going to be every nation for itself to some extent at the beginning. So whichever nation state gets that first patentable vaccine, they're going to scale it up as quickly as they can, with the host nation getting first crack probably, and then slowly spreading to other parts of the world. So when will an effective vaccine be available and administrable to significant numbers of Americans? Hell. You're talking maybe January, February, March, well after the election. And once that vaccine is widely available, then you can start to then people are going to feel freedom, right? More freedom to go out and go about their business somewhat per usual. So that's kind of what we're up against here with that, right? You can say we're going to reopen the economy, I don't know, let's say, some have said maybe June 1st, maybe July 1st. It's one thing to say that, right? But it's another thing to actually make it happen in terms of the free choices that we make in a free market economy to take advantage of that option. Most of us aren't going to feel very good about that until we have a vaccine that's readily available, and that's some time out, unfortunately. And we'll also be developing, right, viable therapies to treat the symptoms along the way. That will also help. So those are the two key things in terms of getting the economy back. There's probably three things then, right? Probably state level or regional level reopenings on a stepped basis. First allowing some limited forms of interaction and then greater forms of interaction over time. So that's important, right? But then also having a readily available vaccine and then having proven therapies to treat those who still get the virus. Now, will it be chloroquine or whatever? Increasingly, we're finding out that it's not that helpful, and it does maybe more harm than good. That may or may not end up being one of the therapies we can use. Other more promising ones are getting transfusions of blood from those who've already had the virus as a way to build up some resistance and so forth, some antibodies. So, number of things have to happen, and that's just out there in the distance. It's not gonna tailor itself to the election cycle in America. Virus don't care about that, and how people respond to it. It's not going to fit an election timetable. All right. So yeah, Trump is, as usual, right, testing the limits of the American presidency. Does he have total authority, as he claimed the other day? God, I hope not. That's not what our country was founded on. And while you can make a case of sorts for executive prerogative, as per John Locke, you still want to have some boundaries on that. And should we have a president somehow forcing states to reopen against the will of their own people? Doesn't seem viable. I think it's chest beating by Trump. I don't think we're actually going to see him even trying to do that, whatever that would even look like. I don't even know. But, he's making noises about it, so we should pay some attention to it. And we've seen, right, previous presidents have also tested those limits. And then you have to figure out which of those are valid efforts to push the boundaries and which are not valid. And even if it's valid, like with Lincoln and the Civil War, try to get back to normal as quickly as possible once the crisis has passed. So, that's about all the news that fits here. We're adding one more thing, thinking about presidential elections. Yeah, Trump's going to have a lot more money this time to spend on that election cycle. He didn't have that much the last time around, but he got a lot of free media. So he has a big advantage there, right? An incumbent president can raise pretty much as much money as they want to. That should and does scare the Democrats quite a bit. A much bigger war chest for Trump this time around. I lived 15, 16 years in Wisconsin, so I was paying some attention to that election in Wisconsin. Yes, the results came in yesterday. A Trump-endorsed candidate for the Wisconsin Supreme Court lost decisively to a liberal Democrat. Kelly lost to Karofsky. That was an upset. The election fiasco in Wisconsin. So I think Democrats were angry. I think you're still getting backlash against Trump by those who oppose him, being maybe a little more motivated right now than those who support Trump. So if we're reading that as kind of a harbinger, right, because many say as Wisconsin goes in November, so will go the nation. It's kind of one of those bellwether states for sure. It's one of the reasons Trump won election in 2016 was he won Wisconsin by the narrowest of margins. That was indeed an accurate harbinger that anticipated his electoral college victory. So if this is a read of sorts on that, reading the tea leaves, which you don't want to read too much into those leaves, but it's always tempting. This is not a great result for President Trump. That an endorsed candidate of his lost decisively, and then that candidate was expected to win, and they lost by 10 points. Wow. So Democrats in Wisconsin seemed super motivated to turn out. If that same sort of a model holds true in November, Trump is done. If Trump can turn things around, come up with a differential sort of a strategy here that maybe doesn't include Wisconsin, if the economy starts to show signs of revival by then, he's right back in the thick of things for sure. But right now you would say some things have to change for Trump to have a good chance of getting reelected. As things stand now, his chances are probably on the margins. You wouldn't rule it out by any means, but you wouldn't put much money on him either, although things could change between now and then, always the caveat. All right, so thanks all. Hang in there, man. And I'll talk to you guys soon.